Evelyn Garcia never anticipated this moment would come standing in the middle of a bustling city diner, balancing a tray of dishes in one hand and her swollen belly beneath a shapeless apron in the other, only to lock eyes with the very man who had abandoned her years before. His razor-sharp suit, glimmering watch, and flashy entourage all screamed wealth and power, a far cry from the struggling college student she once knew. As she felt her heart pound in her chest, Evelyn forced herself to breathe. The rich millionaire smirked at her, clueless about the secret that would soon upend his entire world. The lights of downtown Washington shimmered through the wide windows of the Grand Maple Hotel. It was the eve of an extravagant fundraiser organized by Donovan Enterprises. Michael Donovan, the young billionaire heir to the Donovan fortune, thrived on such social events. In the midst of the tall glass walls, the refined crowd and the swirling ambiance of jazz music, he held court. Dressed in a tailored midnight blue suit, Michael moved through the crowd of politicians, CEOs, and celebrities like a lion roaming his territory. But if anyone had been paying attention, they would see fleeting moments of restlessness in his eyes. The carefully practiced smile, the empty laughter at shallow compliments, there was an undercurrent of dissatisfaction behind it all. Michael took a sip of champagne, allowing the crisp taste to distract him from the swirling thoughts in his mind. His phone buzzed. A message from his associate, Patricia Townsend, told him of a new commercial property ripe for acquisition. Just as he was about to reply, Michael's father, the legendary magnate Robert Donovan, materialized at his side. Tall and formidable, Robert had the presence of a man who owned half the city. And indeed, he nearly did. "You're staring at your phone again," Robert said in a half-amused, half-disapproving tone. Michael looked up, flashing a quick grin. "I'm tying up loose ends. Patricia's found a new property we could seize from a struggling competitor. It's an opportunity we can't pass up." Robert nodded. "Stay focused, son. Tonight is not just about business. It's about Alliance's impressions and continuing the Donovan legacy." Michael heard the familiar ring of paternal pressure in that phrase, continuing the Donovan legacy. For as long as he could remember, that was the only drumbeat to which he'd marched. He couldn't shake the sense that something was missing in his life, but he would never let his father see that doubt. He excused himself to greet a few acquaintances, passing the elegantly arranged buffet, where he noted a young woman, tall, graceful, with a quiet smile, working as one of the catering staff. She looked vaguely familiar. Michael paused for a second, feeling a strange pull, but the memory didn't crystallize. He moved on, dismissing it as a trick of the eye. The next morning, Michael woke in his penthouse apartment high above the city. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows. He donned his usual morning attire, crisp shirt and slacks, and took his black coffee strong with no sugar while skimming financial reports on his tablet. Amid the lines of figures and projections, he was thrust back to old ghosts he thought he had buried. He remembered a time when he was not yet the CEO, but a rebellious college sophomore at the University of Washington, hidden from the paparazzi by an alias. That was when he met Evelyn Garcia. She was pursuing a degree in creative writing and worked part-time at the campus cafe. They both disliked the typical upper-class illusions and found common ground late at night, sitting in deserted libraries or cheap pizzerias, sharing hopes and dreams. The relationship blossomed quickly. Michael introduced Evelyn to a life of small luxuries, paying for romantic dinners and weekend getaways, though he never mentioned his father's empire. It felt good to be valued for who he was, not the Donovan name. And Evelyn was Ernest, a dreamer who wanted to become an author. When they were together, she read him bits of poems she wrote on napkins, told him stories of her grandmother's unwavering belief in love, and shared her fear of losing herself in a chaotic world. But fear turned to heartbreak when Michael's father discovered the relationship. Faced with an ultimatum: stay with the unworthy girl or lose his access to the Donovan empire, Michael found himself cornered. He had ambitions, obligations, and a father who cast a shadow he couldn't outrun. Swallowing the lump in his throat, he chose his father's acceptance. It was an ugly, painful confrontation with Evelyn. In his final conversation, fueled by panic and anger, he said cruel words, attacking her dreams and ridiculing her modest background. She left in tears, and he never saw her again. Michael forced himself out of the reverie, rubbing his temples as if to erase the memory. It was ancient history, he told himself. He had moved on. She had surely moved on too. There was no point in dwelling on things that could not be changed. A few weeks later, Michael ventured into one of the city's exclusive restaurants for a business lunch with Patricia Townsend. As the CFO of Donovan Enterprises, Patricia was methodical, sharp, and unyielding when it came to sealing deals. They had arrived early, taking a private booth in the back. Just as Michael was about to finalize the details of $1 million property purchase, his gaze drifted to a waitress handling a heavy tray with impressive grace. He froze. She was pregnant, visibly so, perhaps 6 or 7 months along. There was something strikingly familiar about her eyes, the curve of her face. He tore his gaze away, feeling an odd tension in his chest. The waitress approached their table carefully, placing their drinks in front of them. Up close, her features stirred old emotions he thought he'd buried. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore a worn-out expression that came with the exhaustion of working long shifts. He glanced at her name tag, E. Garcia. Time seemed to slow. Evelyn. Could it be? But her expression was detached, professional. She didn't smile, didn't offer any sign of recognition. Perhaps he was mistaken. He stuttered in his greeting, a jolt of embarrassment surging through him. "Is there anything else I can get you to?" she asked politely, her voice carrying a soft melodic tone that sent shivers down his spine. Patricia barely looked at the waitress. "We'll let you know if we need anything else." "Thank you." She turned back to Michael. "So about the property in downtown Redwood, are we moving forward?" Michael forced himself to rejoin the conversation. "Yes, proceed with the legal paperwork." As Evelyn walked away, Michael's eyes followed her. What if... No, he told himself. It wasn't possible. Besides, she had obviously moved on. She was pregnant, possibly married. A swirl of conflicting emotions threatened to destabilize him. 2 days later, Michael made a surprise drop-by to the same restaurant. Part of him was driven by a compulsion he couldn't explain. Patricia teased him, suspecting he was interested in a new venture, but he said he simply enjoyed the ambiance. He didn't see Evelyn at first. The lunch rush was in full swing, with wait staff rushing around and customers filling every seat. After scanning the bustling crowd, he finally caught sight of her. She was busily wiping down a table, her brow creased in concentration. Her belly was more prominent under the tight black uniform shirt. The sight of it twisted something inside him. Regret, jealousy, confusion. Who was the father? Did she love him? But deeper than that, Michael remembered he had once spoken about starting a family with her on starry nights during their college romance. She had wanted kids one day to share the same unconditional love her grandmother had given her. He edged closer somewhat, hoping she would look up, maybe give him a sign she recognized him. But she kept her distance, working briskly, to keep pace with the crowd. Irrational frustration simmered within him. Fine if she wanted to pretend he was nobody. So be it. Moments later, he took a seat at an empty table, glancing at her direction. She approached with her notepad. He lifted his chin, adopting the suave, confident posture that had become second nature. "I'll have the daily special," he said, then paused. "Evelyn. Garcia, right?" Her eyes flashed for a fraction of a second, but she kept her composure. "Yes, sir," she said politely, as if speaking to a complete stranger. He forced a disarming smile. "You look familiar." She scribbled down his order without looking up. "I hear that a lot," she said, curtly. "Excuse me." Her clipped tone stung. She vanished into the kitchen before he could press further. Michael felt anger flare. How dare she brush him off so casually? He told himself that she was just being professional. But a voice in his head whispered that he deserved it after the way he left her. For the next half hour, he waited for his food, scanning her every movement. She navigated the restaurant gracefully, assisting customers, despite the weight of her pregnancy. She even managed a tender smile for an elderly man at a corner table. Yet whenever their eyes met, she was cold and distant. Finally, as she served his lunch, he allowed an insensitive remark to slip out, defense and hurt fueling his words. "So, is the father around, or—" Evelyn's lips tightened. "That's none of your business," he sneered, leaning back. "I guess not. Just seems like a tough job waiting tables in your condition. Then again, some choices lead us here, don't they?" She blanched, anger and hurt flickering in her gaze. "Enjoy your meal," she said before storming away. Michael instantly regretted the venom in his tone, but it was too late. That night, Evelyn sat in her cramped studio apartment on the outskirts of town. She was exhausted beyond words, her feet throbbing and her back aching from the relentless shifts. Tears pricked her eyes as she stroked the gentle curve of her belly. Why did Michael Donovan have to reappear? She had done everything in her power to bury the memories of their short-lived marriage. They had secretly eloped one summer during college, deliriously in love, convinced they could conquer any obstacle. But when Robert Donovan discovered the secret, the fallout was swift and ruthless. The Donovans' legal team had annulment papers drawn up with an ultimatum that would keep Evelyn away from their precious heir. Pressured, humiliated and confused, she had left heartbroken and penniless. And now she had struggled to build a new life. She dedicated herself to finishing her studies, but fate dealt her blow after blow. Her grandmother's health deteriorated, and medical bills mounted. Evelyn had to drop out to work full-time. She made ends meet for a while, but everything became even more complicated when she found herself pregnant not from a random fling, but from a brief reunion with Michael, right before he left the city again. She had never managed to inform him. She told herself he wouldn't care, not after how things ended. But seeing him at the diner mocking her stoked the embers of old fury. She tried to dismiss him from her mind, focusing on how to provide a decent life for her baby. Yet there was a sting of betrayal and heartbreak that refused to fade. Michael couldn't shake his confusion. Something about Evelyn was tugging at the corners of his mind more fiercely than ever. He decided to call in a private investigator, George Hall, an old acquaintance with a discreet manner. If that waitress was truly Evelyn Garcia, he wanted to know what had become of her. At the very least, he wanted closure. George reported back a week later. Evelyn had lived in multiple small apartments over the last few years, worked odd jobs, and had recently started renting her current studio. No mention of a spouse. No official father listed on the baby's impending birth certificate. George hesitated on the phone, as if not sure how to phrase his next sentence. "There's something else. The records indicate you were once married to an Evelyn Garcia. There was a civil record of a short marriage at the courthouse, but it was annulled. The files are sealed with powerful lawyer signatures all over them. Are you aware of this, Mr. Donovan?" Michael's pulse hammered. Yes, the humiliating memory was seared into his brain. For an entire summer, he had been blissfully happy with her. Then he'd let his father bulldoze their union into oblivion. "I see," he murmured, the phone cold in his grip. George ventured carefully. "Will you require additional information?" Michael swallowed. "No. That's enough for now." He ended the call, his mind swirling. Annulled or not, Evelyn had been his wife. She had never fully left his heart. Now she was pregnant. Could it be his child? Anger flickered along with shame. She should have told him. But then again, he'd made no effort to reach out. He had walked away, or rather, he had allowed his father to push her away. Michael strode into the diner during a slow afternoon, determined to get answers. He found Evelyn behind the counter, rubbing her lower back in obvious pain. She saw him and tensed her composure, faltering for an instant. "I need to speak with you," he said, voice low with urgency. She scanned the near-empty diner and pointed to a corner table. "Fine. You have 5 minutes. I have tables to serve." They sat across from each other. He inhaled sharply before speaking. "Evelyn, I know about the annulment. I know we were—" He paused, searching for the right words. "Married once?" She gave a bitter laugh. "Yes, you'd recall that, if you hadn't turned your back on me so easily." His eyes clouded with guilt. "I was young, and my father—" "You had a choice," she interjected, voice sharp. "Don't blame your father. You chose your fortune and your empire, and you let me go." Her composure cracked as tears threatened to surface, but she steeled herself. He swallowed, forcing down the shame. "We can't change the past. But I need to know." He gestured at her belly. "Is it mine?" She studied him, a tumult of emotions in her gaze: anger, sorrow, longing, and defiance. Then her jaw tightened. "What if it is? Are you ready to sacrifice your precious Donovan empire this time? Or are you just here out of curiosity?" His stomach twisted. He was both furious at himself and desperate. "I deserve that. But yes, I want to know." A flicker of uncertainty crossed her eyes. Then softly she said, "Yes, Michael. This baby is yours." Silence descended like a suffocating blanket. Michael's entire life, the foundation he'd built around ambition and success, trembled under the realization that he was going to be a father. After a long moment, he exhaled and whispered, "Why didn't you tell me?" She let out a bitter scoff. "I tried. At least I contemplated it. Then I remembered how easily you can dismiss me when I don't fit into your father's plan. I don't need your pity or your money. I can take care of this child on my own." Michael's heart pounded. He wanted to say 1,000 things, to apologize, to promise to change, to declare he would protect her and their unborn child. But Evelyn stood abruptly, tears in her eyes, and said, "I have customers to attend to." He watched her walk away, a hollow ache lodging in his chest. Michael spent the next several days in a haze, barely sleeping. He stopped by the office less often, leaving Patricia Townsend to wonder if something catastrophic had happened. When she tried to confront him about urgent business matters, he brushed her off, claiming a personal crisis. At night, he'd pace his penthouse with its sleek modern furniture and breathtaking skyline views, feeling none of the comfort it once provided. The only thing on his mind was Evelyn and the baby she carried. Guilt churned in his gut as he replayed the old memories, their secret courthouse wedding. The hush of the judge's voice as they exchanged vows, their whispered promises of forever. He had been so convinced that love could conquer all, yet he had allowed fear and greed to overshadow that love. He considered marching into Evelyn's apartment with a suitcase full of money to offer support, but he cringed at how patronizing that might seem. Instead, he mulled over how to prove he cared, how to prove he was no longer the naive young man who had thrown away their love. Determined to do something, Michael visited the diner again, this time quietly and without an entourage. He waited outside until her shift ended. When she emerged, coat folded over her arm, he was there beside his black luxury sedan. She froze keys in hand, wariness in her eyes. "You again?" she said, voice drained. He swallowed hard. "Evelyn, please. Let me drive you home." She hesitated, her shoulders stiff, but the look of exhaustion on her face suggested her reluctance to fight. With a sigh, she nodded, and he opened the door for her. As they drove through the damp city streets, she stared out the window, silent. He dared not turn on the radio, afraid the noise would shatter the fragile moment. Finally, he spoke, voice trembling with sincerity. "I'm sorry. For everything. I was a coward, and I hurt you. If I could undo what happened, I would." Evelyn's lips tightened. "But you can't." He nodded. "I know. But I can help you now. Help us. Let me provide for you during this pregnancy. Medical bills, living expenses, whatever you need. And after the baby's born, I'd like to be part of its life if you'll let me." Tears filled her eyes, though she blinked them away. "I've learned to survive on my own. I don't need your money. It's not just money. I want to be there. I want to do what I should have done a long time ago." She hesitated, torn. A part of her remembered the gentle, earnest college boy she fell in love with. Another part screamed that this was Michael Donovan, the same man who had chosen wealth over love. "I'll consider it," she said quietly, as they pulled up to her humble apartment building. He nodded, relief and worry mingling in his gaze. "May I walk you up?" She shook her head, stepping out. "I can manage," she said, then paused, adding a softer note to her voice. "Thanks for the ride." Michael watched her climb the steps until she disappeared inside. A small flicker of hope lit within him, mixed with a heavy dose of regret. The news of Evelyn's pregnancy did not remain hidden for long. Robert Donovan had a network of informants in every corner of the city, and it wasn't surprising that he soon discovered Michael's unusual absences and the rumor of a pregnant waitress. Furious, he summoned Michael to his mansion, a stately home on the outskirts of Washington, lined with manicured lawns and guarded gates. Michael found his father in the grand study, surrounded by portraits of Donovan ancestors and the trappings of old money. Robert's face was tense, jaw clenched. "I hear you've been chasing some woman carrying your child," he said, voice steeped in disapproval. Michael squared his shoulders, bracing himself. "I'm not chasing her. I'm trying to make amends. She's my ex-wife, Evelyn Garcia." Robert's eyes narrowed. "That lowly waitress I thought we had this sorted years ago. That marriage was annulled." He made a dismissive gesture. We provided her with compensation and ensured she stayed away. This matter is settled. Michael's anger flared. It's not settled. She's pregnant, and it's my responsibility. I won't abandon her again. Robert pinned him with a cold stare. Responsibility. She clearly manipulated you. She always wanted a piece of the Donovan fortune, and now she's using a child as leverage. You are not to get entangled with her again. Michael took a step forward, fists clenched at his sides. This isn't about the fortune, Father. This is about me doing the right thing. I made a mistake, and I won't repeat it. Robert's gaze flickered with barely contained rage. You're the CEO of Donovan Enterprises. You have shareholders' obligations. This scandal could tarnish our family name. She knows exactly what she's doing having this baby. If you're wise, you'll see it's nothing but a trap. Michael trembled with frustration. You never liked her because she was poor. But money doesn't define a person's worth. I won't let you decide the future of my child. Robert straightened the image of a tyrannical king refusing to yield. Then you'll learn the hard way, he said coldly. Don't expect my support. But Michael was no longer that frightened college boy. He turned his back on his father, leaving the study with fists tightly balled. For the first time in his life, he wasn't going to let Robert Donovan dictate his path. Despite her wariness, Evelyn allowed Michael to escort her to a doctor's appointment for a routine prenatal checkup. He insisted on driving her to the clinic, refusing to let her take the bus. During the ride, awkward silence loomed, but every so often they exchanged a glance that spoke volumes of unfinished business. They sat in the waiting room, an odd sight, Michael in his expensive suit, Evelyn in her worn-out coat. She fiddled with a magazine while he tried not to stare at the other pregnant women around them, equally anxious but supported by loving spouses or partners. A pang of guilt struck him once again. He should have been there from the beginning. After the ultrasound, the doctor handed Evelyn a grainy black and white image of the baby. She smiled, tears shining in her eyes. Michael leaned in his heart, thumping as he made out the tiny, delicate shape of a human life. Their child. Tears prickled behind his eyelids. In the parking lot afterward, a wave of emotion caught him off guard. He placed a gentle hand on Evelyn's shoulder. Thank you for letting me be part of this. She inhaled deeply. I never wanted to shut you out entirely. I was just afraid, he nodded. I understand. A new determination solidified in him. He wouldn't fail her this time. He asked her to dinner. She hesitated, but eventually agreed to meet him at a modest diner near her apartment, a place of her choosing, not some expensive restaurant with crystal chandeliers. That evening they sat in a corner booth, the hum of conversations around them. Michael made an effort to ask how she'd been avoiding talk of finances or the past. He wanted to listen. Evelyn revealed how her grandmother had passed away, how the hospital bills had left her in debt, and how she had bounced from one job to another. She shared her fear of not finishing college, her dream to write a novel that might give hope to others in difficult circumstances. Michael absorbed each word, his guilt intensifying. When they parted ways, he handed her a slim envelope. It's not a bribe, he said gently. It's an offer to cover your prenatal care and any debts from the medical bills. Please just let me help. She opened her mouth to protest, but the exhaustion in her bones won out. The diner salary barely covered her rent. The bills were piling up, and the baby would need proper care. Reluctantly, she accepted. Word of Michael's involvement with Evelyn reached the upper echelons of Washington society. Gossip circulated at charity galas. Patricia Townsend, concerned about how this might impact the upcoming acquisitions, tried to reason with him. Michael, look, I know you're dealing with personal issues, but the Redwood property deal needs your attention. The board is getting restless with these rumors. Michael rubbed his temples. I'm taking care of it. Schedule the final negotiations for next week. Until then, keep them off my back. Patricia sighed. Just be mindful of your father's reaction. He's not going to stand idly by. Michael's jaw tightened. My father can do what he wants. This is my life. True to Patricia's warning, Robert Donovan launched a quiet campaign to push Evelyn out of the city. He contacted her landlord, pressed him to raise the rent or cancel her lease. He spoke with the diner's owner, threatening to harm his business if Evelyn wasn't fired. When Michael discovered these manipulations, he confronted his father in a heated argument that nearly ended in blows. "Leave her alone," Michael bellowed in his father's office, his face red with fury. "Or I swear I'll walk away from Donovan Enterprises." Robert's face hardened. "You'd walk away from everything I built." Over some waitress. Michael met his father's gaze, breath ragged. "She's not just some waitress. She's my wife, ex-wife. And that's my child." He turned on his heel and marched out. The moment he left, Michael's phone buzzed. An urgent text from Evelyn read, "They're evicting me. I have nowhere to go." He swore under his breath and sped across town. The landlord was packing up her few belongings into boxes, his face apologetic but firm. "I'm sorry, Ms. Garcia. I'm under pressure." Michael confronted the man, writing a hefty check to cover any alleged lease break fees and future rent. The landlord, eyes wide, quickly backed off. Evelyn stood in the midst of boxes, tears streaking her face. That night, Michael escorted her to a temporary place, a clean, furnished condominium he owned, telling her she could stay as long as she needed. Though reluctant, Evelyn realized she had no other option. She moved in heart pounding at the realization that she was once again entangled in Michael Donovan's life. In the days that followed, a semblance of normalcy tried to take hold. Evelyn lived in the condominium, continuing to work part-time at the diner when her health allowed. Michael visited frequently, bringing groceries, picking up prenatal vitamins, and even driving her to those dreaded routine checkups. Tension lingered between them, laced with old wounds and new possibilities. Occasionally they laughed about the silly memory of their first date back in college, how he spilled soda on her notebook. They talked late into the night about the baby's future, debating names and middle names with hushed excitement. There were even moments of silence where they just looked at each other, the unspoken question hanging in the air. Could we start over? But Evelyn remained guarded. She never forgot how easily Michael had once cast her aside. Meanwhile, Michael struggled with the weight of his father's displeasure and the board's scrutiny. Still, the life growing inside Evelyn's belly drew them closer, knitting together a bond neither had expected to feel again. One evening, as Evelyn sorted through the boxes she had salvaged from her old apartment, she stumbled upon an old shoebox filled with memorabilia from her college days. Pressed between the pages of a poetry anthology was a letter never sent that she had written in anguish after the annulment. It read, "Dear Michael, I don't know if you'll ever see these words, but I need to put them down. I loved you more than I can say. Even now I still love you. But your silence speaks louder than any vow we ever made. I wanted a life with you, a home built on love and trust. You chose to let me go so easily. It hurts more than I can bear. But I won't beg. I am stronger than that. Maybe one day you'll realize what you lost. Or maybe I'll just be a fading memory, and you'll forge a new future without me. Either way, I have to move on. Goodbye, my love. Tears blurred her vision as she read. She thought she had buried these emotions. She had never shown him this letter, preferring to wallow alone in her heartbreak. Now with him back in her life, she felt torn between anger and the lingering love that letter testified to. Later that night, Michael knocked on her door to drop off some new maternity clothes. Finding her red-eyed, he asked gently, "Evelyn, what's wrong?" She handed him the letter wordlessly. He read it, hands trembling, heartbreak etching into his features. "I'm so sorry," he whispered, voice shaky. "If I could go back and change everything, I would." He stopped, emotion choking him. Evelyn's defenses began to crumble. She felt the pull of the love they once shared strong enough to cross years of pain. He looked at her eyes, shimmering with tears. "I was wrong, Evelyn. I was a fool. I regret it every single day." She shut her eyes, tears flowing freely. "Words won't fix this, Michael." "I know," he said, voice cracking. "But maybe actions can." And for the first time in ages, she let him hold her. He wrapped his arms around her gently, and she pressed her face to his chest, allowing herself a moment of solace in the warmth of his embrace. Meanwhile, Robert Donovan, seeing that his son refused to abandon Evelyn, resorted to a final desperate measure. He threatened to remove Michael as CEO of Donovan Enterprises. He manipulated board members using his majority share to call for a vote of no confidence, citing Michael's personal distractions and poor judgment as reasons he was unfit to lead. The news hit Michael like a punch to the gut. If the board voted him out, everything he had worked for would evaporate. More than that, he knew it would further complicate his ability to financially support Evelyn and the baby. His father was effectively cornering him again. This time, however, Michael had grown stronger. With Patricia Townsend's reluctant help, Michael secured enough proxy votes from sympathetic board members who believed in his vision for the company. On the day of the critical board meeting, he stood at the head of the long mahogany table, looking each member in the eye. Robert glowered from his seat at the other end. Michael's voice rang with conviction as he addressed them. "I'm aware there have been rumors about my personal life. Let me be clear. My commitment to Donovan Enterprises is unwavering. I have taken us to new heights with expansions and profitable acquisitions. My personal life has no bearing on my capabilities as CEO. However, I will not sacrifice the well-being of my child or the woman I once loved simply to preserve an image. If that means losing my title, so be it." A murmur rippled through the board members. Robert sneered. "So you admit your personal affairs are interfering with the job?" Michael stood tall, unflinching. "My personal affairs give me perspective. We are not just a corporation. We are people building futures. I refuse to be an empty suit chasing profits at all costs. And if I must choose between family and business, I will choose family." Patricia, who had once been purely about numbers, was moved by his sincerity. She cast her vote in Michael's favor, and though Robert Donovan fought bitterly, Michael barely held on to his position. Defeated Robert stormed out, vowing to cut Michael off financially from his personal fortune. But Michael held his ground. He would keep his role as CEO on his own merits. As Evelyn's due date approached, Michael found himself waking up every morning with a strange blend of excitement and terror. He enrolled them in prenatal classes, attending sessions where they practiced swaddling dolls and learned how to change diapers. The other expectant couples teased them good-naturedly, and Evelyn, in shy moments, introduced Michael as the father of my baby. One evening after a particularly informative class, they returned to the condominium. Evelyn was tired, resting a hand on her lower back. Michael gently led her to the couch. He crouched, placing his palm over her belly. The baby kicked, and Michael's face lit up with childlike wonder. Evelyn laughed, tears glistening. In that moment, a wave of love swept over her, powerful enough to momentarily wash away the bitterness. She realized she still cared for him deeply, no matter how she tried to deny it. Michael took a shaky breath. "Evelyn, when we were in college, I promised you a future that never came to be. I want to fix that. I want us to be a family, if you can ever forgive me." She cupped his cheek. "It's not about just me forgiving you, Michael. We both need to heal." Trust was broken. It won't come back overnight. He nodded, tears threatening to escape his eyes. "I'm willing to wait as long as it takes." In the early hours of a stormy night, Evelyn doubled over with contractions. Michael, awakened by her pained cries, immediately called for an ambulance, helping her into the back seat. Panic and excitement warred within him. He couldn't lose her again. Not now. At the hospital, fluorescent lights glared off polished floors as nurses rushed her into the maternity ward. Michael held her hand, whispering encouragement, though she sometimes gritted her teeth in anger, and squeezed his hand so tightly he winced. Hours passed in a blur of monitors, beeping whispered prayers and heavy breathing. Finally, with a final push and a cry that echoed through the hospital corridors, their daughter entered the world. The doctor placed a tiny, wriggling bundle in Evelyn's arms. Michael looked at his newborn child, tears pouring down his face without shame. "She's perfect," he choked out. In the warmth of that hospital room, with thunder rumbling in the distance, Evelyn looked at Michael, cradling their daughter, and felt something inside her mend. Through heartbreak and betrayal, they had somehow found their way back. She knew the journey wasn't over. Trust needed rebuilding, and the past still haunted them. But in that shining moment, hope bloomed. News of the baby's birth spread quickly through the corporate and social circles. Some tabloids tried to paint Evelyn as a gold digger, snagging a billionaire, while others spun it as a heart-warming story of reunited lovers. Michael hired a PR specialist to fend off the more vicious rumors, determined to shield Evelyn and their daughter, whom they named Aurora Grace Donovan, from the press's hungry eyes. Robert Donovan sent a curt note of congratulations, but made no attempt to visit. Michael felt a pang of sadness, though it was tempered by resolve. He wouldn't let his father's pride tarnish this new beginning. In the following weeks, Evelyn found herself living in a comfortable townhouse Michael purchased in a quieter part of the city. At first, she insisted on returning to her job, but with a newborn, the logistics were daunting. Michael convinced her to take her time, promising her she'd have full independence once she decided on her next steps. Slowly, Evelyn began to trust that he wasn't simply trying to buy her off. She allowed him to support her during her maternity leave, realizing that for once he wasn't trying to control her, he was genuinely trying to be there for their child. One afternoon, a knock on the door startled Evelyn. She opened it to find Robert Donovan standing on the threshold, carrying a large stuffed bear and a cold expression. She swallowed, stepping aside to let him in. He gazed at baby Aurora sleeping in her crib face, unreadable. "I came to see the child," he said gruffly. Evelyn nodded. "She's napping." Robert studied Aurora for a moment, then turned to Evelyn. "Let's be clear. You and I will never see eye to eye. But my son has chosen you and this baby. I can't change that." Evelyn's jaw tightened. She's your granddaughter. Do you want a relationship with her? He hesitated, betraying a sliver of vulnerability. I might, but I won't pretend to like you or forget that you complicated my family's future. Evelyn felt anger flare, but she kept her voice steady. All I ask is that you treat your son and your granddaughter with respect. And if you decide you want to be part of her life, do it wholeheartedly. Don't sabotage us again. He gave a curt nod, leaving the bear on the coffee table. We'll see, he muttered, turning and walking out. Evelyn's heart pounded. She hated that man for the pain he had caused. Yet she saw a glimmer of possibility for Aurora to have a grandfather. Several weeks later, with Aurora thriving, Evelyn enrolled in an online program to finish her degree. She started writing again, short stories. Poems, a heartfelt essay about her experiences with love and betrayal. Michael, seeing her passion rekindled, had an idea. He reached out to an old college friend, turned literary agent Grace Mitchell, who agreed to look at Evelyn's work. At first, Evelyn resisted. She didn't want to rely on Michael's connections. But ultimately, she realized life was giving her another chance to pursue her dream. Grace read one of Evelyn's personal essays and was moved by its raw honesty. She encouraged Evelyn to expand it into a series of pieces about overcoming adversity. Encouraged Evelyn wrote feverishly during Aurora's naps, weaving the story of her life from naive college student to secret wife, to abandoned woman, to struggling single mother, and finally to a mother reclaiming her voice. It was cathartic. She was no longer the victim of circumstance. She was forging her own path. Spring arrived, painting the city in soft hues of pink and green. Michael had spent nearly every free moment helping Evelyn care for Aurora. One evening, as they walked through a quiet park with their daughter in a stroller, Michael stopped by a small pond where cherry blossoms fell like snowflakes. He knelt, taking Evelyn's hand. Her breath caught in her throat. "What are you doing?" she whispered, heart pounding. His voice trembled. "We never got the chance to be husband and wife, not truly. I want to do it right this time, Evelyn. No secrets, no coercion, no father's disapproval. Just us building a family and future together." She looked into his eyes, seeing tears brimming sincerity shining. Her heart fluttered. The memory of their annulment stung, but the warmth of his devotion now was undeniable. He pulled out a simple ring, a delicate band with a small diamond. "Marry me, Evelyn, because I love you, because I love our daughter, and because I want us to be a real family. This time nothing will come between us." Tears cascaded down her cheeks as she recalled the heartbreak, the lost years, and the unborn child she once carried in heartbreak. But now Aurora was here, living proof of a bond they could not sever. With trembling lips, Evelyn whispered, "Yes." He rose, wrapping her in his arms. The wind carried the scent of blossoming flowers as they shared a kiss brimming with promise. Far from the naive teenagers they once were, they stood as two adults tested by life, prepared to face its challenges together. The wedding was a quiet affair, far removed from the media circus that Michael's social standing might have demanded. They opted for a small chapel with only a handful of close friends, Patricia Townsend, Grace Mitchell, and some old college mates who remembered the days when Michael was just a playful economics major, and Evelyn a hopeful writer. No lavish ballrooms or paparazzi. Instead, white lilies adorned the pews and soft piano music drifted through the air. Aurora, dressed in a tiny white dress, cooed as Patricia held her. Evelyn wore a simple lace gown, her cheeks flushed with anticipation, Michael, dressed in a classic black suit, looked at her with awe. As they exchanged vows, tears slid down Evelyn's face. She spoke earnestly, voice shaky but firm. "Michael, you taught me what love could be and unfortunately what it felt like to lose it. But you also showed me that hearts can mend and love can return stronger than before. I vow to stand by you through every storm." Michael's voice wavered with emotion. "Evelyn, you are my guiding light. I let you slip away once. I will never let it happen again. I promise to cherish you, honor you, and never let anyone or anything come between us again." Their rings glinted under the chapel's golden light. The moment the officiant pronounced them, husband and wife, Michael scooped Evelyn into a tender kiss, a blend of relief, joy, and the sweetness of finally righting a terrible wrong. Later at a small reception, they toasted with their closest friends. Patricia, who had witnessed Michael's transformation, raised her glass. "To Michael and Evelyn Donovan, whose love has overcome the greatest obstacles. May their future be filled with the happiness they deserve." In the months that followed, Evelyn and Michael navigated the delicate balance of marriage, parenthood, and business. There were challenges, of course: Aurora's late-night fussiness, the balancing act between board meetings and feedings, and Evelyn's cautious steps back into the literary world. But they faced every hurdle side by side. Evelyn's collection of personal essays found a small publisher, and she received a modest advance. The literary world took notice of her authentic, heartfelt prose. She began speaking at local workshops, sharing her experiences with aspiring writers. The knowledge that she was more than just a waitress or a Donovan cast-off emboldened her. Michael continued to helm Donovan Enterprises, implementing more ethical business practices that prioritized employee well-being and community impact. He had no interest in being just another heartless mogul. Earning the trust of the board took time, but his sincerity resonated with a new generation of leaders. Even Robert Donovan, though still distant, seemed to acknowledge his son's newfound strength. Fate had one last twist in store. One day, as Evelyn strolled with Aurora in the park, a frail woman with a familiar face approached. It was Harriet Wells, once a devoted secretary to Robert Donovan, who had pulled strings to orchestrate the annulment. Now, racked by guilt and facing her own mortality, Harriet confessed the depths of Robert's manipulations. She revealed that Robert had forced Evelyn's eviction and threatened to sabotage any of her job prospects, leaving her no choice but to leave quietly. Evelyn listened in shock. She had long suspected the Donovans' involvement, but hearing the full details still felt like a punch to the gut. However, Harriet's revelation also held an unexpected key: some documents proving that the annulment had been coerced and that Evelyn was entitled to certain shares Robert had promised as a form of hush money. "Why tell me this now?" Evelyn asked, voice trembling with a mixture of anger and pity. Harriet's wrinkled eyes shimmered with tears. "I can't leave this world without trying to make it right. You deserve to know the truth." Evelyn took the documents, heart pounding. Later she showed them to Michael. Though furious at his father's tyranny, Michael comforted her, saying, "The past is the past. We have each other now. That's all that matters." However, the documents also empowered Evelyn to realize she had a rightful stake in Donovan Enterprises, albeit a small one. She decided not to press legal charges, but kept the documents as a safeguard, ensuring Robert Donovan would never dare try to break them apart again. With the final loose ends tied, Michael and Evelyn found themselves on the balcony of their townhouse one warm evening. Aurora asleep inside. The city lights glimmered below, a testament to how far they had come. Evelyn leaned her head on Michael's shoulder, fingers entwined with his. They had traversed heartbreak, betrayal, and the burdens of wealth emerging stronger and more united. Their story wasn't a fairy tale, there had been too much pain for that. But it was a story of redemption of love that refused to die under the weight of greed and pride. With Aurora's soft breathing in the background, Michael pressed a gentle kiss to Evelyn's temple. She smiled, tears of gratitude brimming in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, "for never giving up this time." He turned to her, his gaze full of warmth. "Thank you for giving me a second chance." And as they held each other, the air humming with the quiet promise of a new beginning, they knew that this time the Donovan name would be built on something more enduring than money, a family bound by love. And so concludes the tumultuous journey of Michael Donovan and Evelyn Garcia, two souls caught between the brutal clash of fortune and destiny, who discovered that true happiness comes not from wealth or empire, but from the strength of forgiveness and enduring love. Their story reminds us that mistakes of the past do not define our future, that with genuine remorse and unwavering determination, hearts can heal and love can indeed have a second chance. If you found yourself moved by their trials and ultimate triumph, then join us in celebrating love, redemption, and the power of hope. Like this video. If you believe in second chances, share it with someone who needs a spark of hope, and subscribe for more riveting tales that bring tears, laughter, and inspiration to life's grand stage. Thank you for watching, and remember, no matter how dark the path, love always finds a way home.